Close your eyes right now. That isn't darkness. Light still bleeds through the lids. Turn off every lamp in your house tonight. Still not darkness. There's a router blinking green, a streetlight leaking around the curtain, a phone breathing on the nightstand. Go down to the basement and shut the door behind you. Closer. Still not it. Real darkness isn't dim. Real darkness is a wall. You put your hand in front of your face and it isn't there. And here is the part almost nobody realizes. To your body, that wall is not nothing. It is a signal. One of the oldest instructions your biology knows how to read. For 300,000 years it arrived every single evening, on time, without fail. You have been jamming it for 100 years. In 1992, a scientist at the National Institute of Mental Health switched the jamming off. 7 people, 14 hours of true night, every night, for a month. He wasn't studying sleep. What came up out of those 7 people went 4 layers deep, and it got stranger the further down he dug. The scientist was Thomas Wehr, and you should know what he was actually hunting, because it explains everything that follows. Wehr helped identify seasonal affective disorder, the reason some people collapse into depression every winter. He helped develop light therapy to treat it. His entire career was one question. Why does the amount of light in a day change what happens inside a human being? So he built a season. He took 7 volunteers and gave them a 10-hour day instead of the 16 we all live in, roughly the natural photo period of London or New York at the end of October. The other 14 hours were total darkness. They could sleep as much as they wanted. 7 people is a small study. That deserves to be said out loud, and I'm going to say it once here rather than bury it. But what happened to those 7 has since been confirmed twice. Outdoors, on people who weren't in a laboratory at all. Let's go down. Layer 1. The first night, they slept 11 hours, straight through. That was the debt. Every one of them had been running a chronic sleep deficit they didn't know about, and given 14 hours of dark and no alarm, their bodies simply took what they were owed. Then the debt ran out, and something else surfaced, something worth noticing here. At first they'd lie awake in the dark for an hour or two, before sleep would come at all. Not insomnia, the body waiting for a signal it hadn't received in years. By week 4, the pattern had locked. Total sleep had settled at 8.36 hours a night, up from 7.26 in their normal lives. But it no longer arrived in one piece. They slept 3 to 5 hours. Then they woke up. They stayed awake, in the dark, for 1 to 2 hours. Then they slept another 3 to 5 hours until morning. Nobody instructed them to do this. There was no protocol, no suggestion, no schedule. 7 ordinary adults, given darkness, spontaneously split their night in half. And it took weeks. It didn't snap into place on night 3. Whatever this was, it was buried deep enough that it needed most of a month to climb out. That's layer 1. It's the part that gets quoted. It is also the shallowest thing Wehr found. Layer 2. You'd assume that gap in the middle was just lying awake, staring at a ceiling, waiting. It wasn't. Wehr measured their hormones during that window and found their brains flooded with prolactin, the same hormone that rises during meditation, and in mammals that lie motionless for hours while brooding over their young. It is the chemistry of stillness. The volunteers described it themselves. Calm, reflective, quiet. Not restless, not frustrated. Something closer to a trance they could think inside. They weren't asleep. They weren't awake either. They were in a third state. And English has no word for it, because almost nobody alive has been there. Layer 3. And it wasn't only sleep that changed. This is the thing Wehr was actually hunting, and it took 25 years to catch it outdoors. In the lab, he watched the duration of their nighttime melatonin release stretch out. Their biological night was getting longer. Not their sleep, their night. The internal window in which the body believes it is dark. That matters more than it sounds, because that window is how mammals know what season it is. Not temperature, not the calendar. The length of the biological night is the signal that tells animals to breed, to migrate, to lay down fat, to grow a winter coat. It is the planet's oldest clock, and almost every creature on Earth runs on it. 25 years later, Kenneth Wright took 5 people camping in Colorado near the winter solstice. 1 week, only natural light, 13 times more daylight than their normal winter routine, and no artificial light after sunset. When they came back, their melatonin was rising 2.6 hours earlier than before. Their biological night had lengthened on its own, to match the season, exactly the way an animal's does. Wright's own comment on the result: this had long been assumed and never demonstrated. So sit with what that means. The machinery is intact. Your body still measures the season, every night, the way it has for millions of years. For 100 years, it has been getting the same answer. Summer. Endless summer. You have never had a winter. Layer 4. Sleep, hormones, seasons. That's still not the bottom. Different experiment. 13 sighted adults, blindfolded completely, for 5 days. 96 hours of unbroken dark. 10 of them started hallucinating. It began after the first day. Simple at first, spots and flashes of light. Then it escalated. Faces, landscapes, ornate objects with detail and structure. And crucially, every one of them knew the images weren't real. These weren't people losing their minds. These were intact brains, generating imagery out of nothing. The scans explained why. After 5 days of darkness, the visual cortex, the region that exists solely to process sight, had begun responding to touch. Their fingers were lighting up the part of the brain built for eyes. They got measurably better at reading Braille. And when researchers temporarily disrupted the visual cortex with magnetic stimulation, their Braille reading fell apart. The takeover was real, and it was load-bearing. Not 5 years. 5 days. The visual cortex does not sit patiently in the dark waiting for the lights to come back. It goes looking for work. And then they took the blindfolds off. 24 hours later, the signal was gone. The visual cortex had handed everything back. Your brain rebuilt itself in 5 days and unbuilt itself in 1. Layer 5. So more darkness is better. That is obviously where this is going. No. On February 14, 1972, a French researcher named Michel Siffre climbed into Midnight Cave in Texas and stayed for 205 days. He came apart down there. His memory failed first. He couldn't recall what he'd done a day or two earlier. The days stopped attaching to anything. His sense of time dissolved completely. Some of his days ran 18 hours, some 36, some stretched past 50. He couldn't tell which was which. By the end there was depression, and there were hallucinations, and the isolation had become something close to unbearable. When the surface team finally told him the experiment was over, Siffre thought it was still mid-August. He had lost nearly 3 weeks of his own life without noticing. So, 14 hours of darkness rebuilt 7 people. 200 days of it took Siffre apart. What's the difference? Siffre had a light bulb. He says so himself. The cave was black except for a single bulb he controlled. What was taken from him was never light. It was time. He had no clock, no dawn, no way to know when the dark would end, or whether it would. Wehr's 7 knew exactly what hour it was. They were at home. They had people. And every single morning, without exception, the dark stopped. That's the whole difference. Darkness didn't heal them, and darkness didn't break him. What mattered was whether it ended. Which is worth remembering the next time someone describes solitary confinement as simply time in a dark room. Same physical conditions. Opposite outcome. What our ancestors had was never darkness on its own. It was darkness with a rhythm, and other people inside it. Come back up. You can't run Wehr's experiment. There is no room in your city dark enough, and no month in your life empty enough. But the smaller version is measurable, and it's absurdly fast. 8 people spent 1 week camping in the Rocky Mountains with no artificial light. Every single one of their internal clocks locked onto sunrise and sunset. Early risers and night owls alike. All of them, in under a week. Melatonin came roughly 2 hours earlier, and you don't even need the week. A 2-day weekend outdoors moved people's clocks 1.4 hours. 69% of the full week's shift from 2 nights. Meanwhile, clinicians now use supervised dark therapy as a treatment for mania in bipolar disorder, and blue-blocking glasses as a kind of artificial night. And there are retreats where people pay money to sit in a completely dark room for days, buying back, at considerable expense, the thing every human being on Earth was handed for free every night for 300,000 years. So, tonight, when you switch off the light and it still isn't dark, that's the thing to notice. Not that you're losing sleep, that the signal never arrives. There are 4 layers of you down there waiting on an instruction that stopped coming a century ago, and the only thing standing in the way is a bulb.